In this video, we will show you how to replace your engine's knock sensor on this Chevy Silverado with a 4.3-liter engine. This will be mounted along the back side of your engine. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we need to do is make our way to the negative battery terminal. We'll be using an 8mm to remove this and set it aside. The next thing we have to do is have our engine on top dead center. That will be easiest to do if you remove the fan shroud from the area. For the fan shroud itself, it's going to have 4 push clips, 2 along each side. To remove your push clips, you carefully start pulling out the center to unlock it, and then you remove the outer portion as well to fully remove it. A quick inspection set it aside. Get this next one here. Okay, that's this side of the vehicle. Let's do the exact same thing on the other side of the shroud, and then we'll continue with our 2 10mm headed bolts. Next one. Let's get these 10mm bolts out of here. Take hold of this, carefully lift it up, being careful not to cause any damage to your radiator located along the front of this. A quick inspection and we'll set it aside. To remove the lower portion of this shroud, go ahead and take hold of it and roll it up and out of the way, once again paying attention to that radiator. The next thing we'll have to do is align our timing marks on the crank pulley itself and the engine. Now I already have these marked off. The areas that need to align, you have the blue areas along the top here, and then down along the bottom, I've also marked that position. Typically these won't be properly aligned. You're going to have to turn the crank with a 16mm clockwise until they are. We want to make sure the engine's on top dead center on cylinder 1 on the compression stroke. The way you can tell it's on the compression stroke is because the engine will get harder to turn over. We'll make our way right down here, find that center mounting bolt, and now we'll start turning this clockwise, only clockwise. Right now it's fairly easy to turn. It's getting a little harder. I can feel it wants to turn back as soon as I release. Now it's easy again. Let's pay attention to those alignment marks. So right there, I just saw the yellow go by. That yellow one is the first marking, which will align down at the bottom there. As we bring this down to its alignment point down there, we should also see the blue marking make its way around as well. And there's the blue marking right there. You want to make sure you have it as close to aligned as possible while on the compression stroke on cylinder 1. In this area, we'll be loosening this clamp with an 8mm or flathead screwdriver. You don't need to completely dislodge it, you just need to have a little bit of movement here. Go ahead and separate this. A quick inspection of each part, and we'll continue on just behind that. Take hold of this hose, give it a little wiggle, and slide it off. Make sure that's soft and pliable. In this area, you're going to find a plastic wing nut. Turn this counterclockwise and remove it. Now we can take hold of this and carefully start lifting it up and off of here. Go ahead and set that aside. Continuing on, we'll make sure that we cover the port leading into the engine. Once you know exactly where each one of the spark plug wires goes to, we'll continue on to removing them from the distributor cap. You can start on whichever side you'd like. I'll be over on the passenger side, starting along the rear with that coil wire. As you remove each and every one of these, give them a close inspection. If you see any funny colors, it's corrosion and it needs to be dealt with. There we are. We'll set all these aside and do the exact same thing on the other side of the distributor cap. Now we can start removing the distributor cap from the area. The distributor cap is held in place with two T20 screws. There's one along the back side, and there's one along the front side of the distributor cap. Go ahead and loosen up each of these, and then we'll remove the cap from the area. All right, that one's nice and loose. We'll do the exact same thing to the forward bolt. All right, let's get the cap out of here. We'll just give this a quick inspection and set it aside. With the cap out of the way, we'll continue on with our electrical connector. For this, you just want to go ahead and lift up on that locking tab, pull it out of place, and give it a quick inspection. Once again, we're looking for corrosion. That would be a bad sign. Let's pause back there. We'll make our way over here. We need to disconnect this evap line. To disconnect it, looking at it, you can see on the connector, it has a white tab. Go ahead and depress that and slide this out of position. A quick inspection of the line and set it aside. We need to have a whole bunch of slack along the backside of that distributor. To press this in, you can use a small pick, screwdriver, whatever you might happen to have. That looks good. We'll just bring this up inside this area here. There we are. Moving along from the distributor, make your way just under that. You're going to find that you have your oil pressure switch. We'll continue down a little bit along the backside of the engine, and that's where you're going to find the knock sensor. To disconnect the knock sensor, it's important to make sure that you disconnect the wiring harness first. For this wiring harness, you want to press in on the metal locking tab and then pull it out of place. A quick inspection for corrosion, of course. There we are. You can see that wiring harness. That looks okay. With the wiring harness disconnected, we'll continue on to the 13mm headed bolt that holds this in place. Before you remove the knock sensor, pay close attention to the orientation. When we go to install the knock sensor, you want to make sure you have it in the exact same position. On our application, the knock sensor connector is aiming pretty much straight up. Make our way back here, we'll remove that bolt and the knock sensor. There it is, friend. With the knock sensor out of position, the next thing that you need to do is clean and inspect the mounting point on the engine where your knock sensor will mount. We have to make sure it's a clean mounting surface. Just use a piece of sandpaper for this and give it a light scuffing. Okay, let's prepare for the installation of our knock sensor. When we go to install this, we want to make sure we have it in the proper orientation so the connector is facing up towards the distributor. You don't want to have it off to one side or the other, and even worse, aiming down. With that said, we'll take that mounting bolt and slide it right on through the center port there. We'll take this and put it in position, start it in, snug it up, and the torque for this is 18 foot-pounds. Getting this lined up along the back side of the engine's a little bit difficult. Obviously, we'll fix the orientation of this as we start snugging it. I just snugged it up. Now I'll back it off just a tiny bit. We'll continue on with the alignment of that knock sensor. Once again, we want to have it facing towards the distributor. Make sure we can still get our electrical connector on there. Snug it up. We'll get the torque wrench on there. A quick confirmation of the orientation. And of course, we want to make sure that we do have that torqued to the manufacturer's specifications. And now we can continue on with our electrical connector. Let's get that connector on here. Reaching along the back side of the engine, we have to try to find the connector. And then of course get that onto the knock sensor. Line it up, press it on. There we are. Listen for a click from that. We'll give it a little tug to make sure it's secured in place and we can continue on. Nice. Now that we have that mounted, let's make our way to that electrical connector. Press it in, listen for a click. Go ahead and give it a little tug to make sure it's completely secured in place. It's time to install the distributor cap. We'll make sure we have it in the proper positioning so we have the area with the 4 plug wires facing towards the passenger side of the vehicle. We'll get it in position, align our mounting bolt holes, and start in each of those 2 small mounting bolts. Careful not to drop these along the back side of the engine. That can be problematic. We'll use a T20 Torx bit to snug these up, and then we can torque them to 21 inch-pounds. It's not very much. There we are. Now it's time for the spark plug wires. We'll start with the coil wire, which is around the center of the engine here. Go ahead and take this and bring it down along the side of the engine, underneath the bracket, and all the way to the back prong on the passenger side of the distributor cap. Slide this right back there. When you go to install these, it's a good idea to use a tiny bit of dielectric lubricant. We'll just slide this right on there. Double check to make sure it's completely seated up against the base. We'll give it a light wiggle to ensure that it is properly secured and continue on with the rest of our spark plug wires. Starting with the front spark plug wire on the passenger side. We'll follow that wire. Confirm we have the proper wire. Now for the passenger side, this forward wire will be on the forward prong on the distributor cap, the forward port. Once again, pressing it on, a quick wiggle. Continue on down along the passenger side. The center spark plug wire will go to the center port, and the rearward wire will go to the rearward port that's just forward of the coil wire. Got my third wire. We'll just confirm everything is secured on the passenger side of the distributor cap. Now we'll make our way to the driver's side. You're going to have to pay attention to the wiring sequence. For the passenger side, starting with the forward spark plug wire, this time the spark plug wire will go on the center port on the driver's side of the distributor cap. We'll press that in. The middle wire will go on the forward port. And now the rear spark plug wire goes on the rear port on the driver's side of the distributor cap. One last confirmation while we're back here to ensure everything is properly installed. This looks perfect. Now we can install the fan shroud. Before we start bringing it down into position, if you were to look along the rear of the radiator, you'll find that it does have two tabs that protrude out. They're small hooks. We'll take this shroud and gently rest it down into those hooked areas. As we bring this down, you want to be extremely careful not to cause any damage to the radiator. Pay attention to those hooked areas. Continuing on to the upper fan shroud, we'll just rest this one in position along the bottom. You should find that on each side it does have an alignment tab that will fit up through this corresponding hole. As long as it's aligned as it should be, you should be able to install each of your push clips, 2 along each side of the fan shroud. Same on the other side. Now we'll continue on to our two 10mm headed mounting bolts up along the top. Start them in, snug them up. Right there is bottomed out. We'll just make sure it's snug. Confirm the fan shroud is properly secured to the vehicle. Now it's time for the air intake. When you go to put this in position, along the bottom of the air intake, you'll find that you have a hooked area that needs to fit around the forward edge of the throttle body. Once it has, we'll roll this down and align the mounting point. With it in place, we'll snug it up with that wing nut in the center. Make sure that's nice and tight. Let's get this in place. Now we can install the rest of our intake. Let's get this in position. There we are, tight fit. Let's pause there, make our way to the other end. This portion will make its way to the upper air filter housing. You want to make sure that this aligns as you continue pressing it in. You may have to try to twist things as needed. There we are. Once you feel as though you have it bottomed out, continue on with tightening each one of those two clamps with your 8mm. Confirm each of them are tight. You don't want any dirty or unmetered air making its way into the engine. Let's reconnect in our mass airflow sensor. Once you do press this into position, lock it in with your gray locking tab. I got a nice click from that. We'll give it a tug, lock it down. Reconnect your negative battery terminal. Start it in, snug it up with your 8mm. Double check to make sure it's completely secured. Okay friend, we've got our vehicle back together. At this point, what you need to do is hop in the passenger compartment. Start up the vehicle, let it run for a little while and get up to normal operating temperature. Make sure there's no check engine light and no running condition, and then you can go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.